And President Trump called the mission a tremendous success, a mission carried out with maximum stealth. This morning, we're getting our first look at that extraordinary attack on 3 Iranian nuclear sites over the weekend. This fireball in the night sky, explosions heard in the distance at Iran's Isfahan nuclear facility. Part of the barrage known as Operation Midnight Hammer that included the largest strike by B-2 stealth bombers in history. And despite all the secrecy surrounding the mission, one of the biggest concerns is whether the Iranians were able to move the enriched uranium before the strikes occurred.
By now, we've all witnessed the bombings in Israel, Gaza, Strip, Iran. We've also witnessed the U.S. drop 30,000-pound bombs on nuclear enrichment sites in Iran. But what exactly does this mean? This conflict, this war, has been evolving for some time, and here we are full circle. Today on Bets and Badges, we have the pleasure and distinct honor to reintroduce the mayor of the city of Sunny Isles, Larisa Svechin. Good morning, ma'am. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good deal. And with me, I have my trusted colleague, retired police chief, David Magnuson, who's also a military historian. How are you, David?
Doing great. Good to see you both. Very interesting topic that we're going to get into. And I'm excited to see where this is going to go, because there's so much I want to learn too and discuss. So again, great to see you.
So Mayor, let's jump right to you. Let's get right into it. You are the mayor of the city of Sunny Isles. No doubt one of the cities in our state with the largest population of Jewish and Russian and Middle Eastern folk. So what's going on? And can you help us make sense of what's happening in the Middle East, and how does it impact us, or how will it impact us moving forward here in the U.S.?
I can tell you that from what I've seen there personally when I was there last June, and what I hear on a daily basis, I have a lot of family that lives all over Israel. We have a sister city, Netanya, in Israel, and I am very tuned in to what's happening there. So if you ask the average Israeli that lives there right now, life is just like normal. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on how you look at it, and maybe David can speak to that. They're used to this. This has been part of their lives since the beginning of the state of Israel. Now it's very different. And they were very much in support of President Trump being elected. And I'll tell you why. Not for, first of all, they're a very liberal society and a very secular society, which I think is very important for people to know. They are not an overall religious country. But the reason that they needed the support from someone like our president was because they knew that we would get to this point. And anyone that was paying attention knew that we would get to this point, that eventually we would have to make sure that Iran did not in any way impose a nuclear threat to not just there, but the rest of the world. So they're teetering on living normal life and making sure that there isn't a nuclear war in the rest of the world.
You mentioned, I'm paraphrasing here, people in Israel, Israelis, are going about their lives as it's just normal. Wrap your head around that. Israel's being bombed, or was bombed. They're in a two-front war, if you will. And yet the people are used to that. My God.
You go back to 48, you go back to 56, you go back to 67, Six-Day War. You go back when the Sadat with the sneak attack Yom Kippur, and how they turned it around when they were teetering on the edge. You go back to Lebanon. You go back to the Infatas, and everything that went on with that. There's just a resiliency there, a toughness. And with that toughness probably comes like business as usual. Mm-hmm. This is nothing new. We can handle it. To your point, Mayor, you were saying getting to a certain point, that we were going to get to a certain point here. And that's why President Trump was to be elected to that extent. And, you can go back into history and say, in the mid-30s, they were getting to that point. Mm-hmm. And France and England really chose not to take on Hitler and what he was doing, because he was probing, and they probe and they probe. Later on, General Jodl in Nuremberg, before he got hung, even made the comment when they asked him about all these attacks going in there. Yeah, had they stepped up and stopped us, that would have been it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's where, going back, where history teaches the lesson, if there's a time to act, but don't put it on the shelf, because you may not have that chance again.
And I want to add that at one point it was a 7-front war, where for a place the size of New Jersey, could you just imagine if New Jersey was attacked, 7 sides? So it's not something that they necessarily have gotten used to from that point of view. October 7th, the horror of that, but the significance of that created a storm that required them, and I believe most Jews around the world, and people that support the Jewish people, to understand that this is the time to be really strong and, like David said, resilient, and really show that we're not going to let history repeat itself. So you have people, for instance, in my city, like you mentioned, we have a very large Russian-speaking population, many of whom are either Jewish or have some Jewish roots. But we also have a lot of Israelis and a lot of other people from the Middle East, whether that be from Turkey, from Iran, not really from Egypt or any of those other places. But they feel very strongly, obviously, because they have family there. So this isn't something that is a conceptual, idea that you can talk over, a glass of wine and argue. This is something that touches them very seriously every single day. I'm constantly on my phone checking in every time there's a bomb. And by the way, they're still being bombed. It might not be by Iran, but it's still Iranian proxies that are bombing them. So it never stopped. There's no such thing as a ceasefire when you're an Israeli, as far as I'm concerned. But I do think that the people here are very much in tune to what's happening.
Can you share what's going on and what's the genesis, or what's the premise behind this war right now, today?
After October 7th, 2023, October 6th and October 7th, the world, between those 24 hours, the world changed in such a way that will affect us and generations, at least the next 2 generations. The kind of crimes that were committed against those people, I don't believe have ever been committed in such a way in history. Maybe Genghis Khan, honestly. I can't even think about it. But the fact that it was recorded and live streamed, it was the most horrendous thing for people to do to civilians. Forget about the soldiers. That's another story. And so because of that, Israel couldn't just be calm anymore, be diplomatic, always sort of turning the other cheek. It goes back actually to the Torah. And it is written that you do not kill people. That is absolutely not allowed. But if someone's going to kill you, you kill them first. And that is actually written in the Old Testament. And that is something that the Jewish people, I think, finally understood, that they cannot wait. Golda Meir very famously said that if the Palestinians put their guns down, there will be peace. If we put our guns down, there will be no more Israel. And that is an impactful statement, which is very true to this day, and it will continue to be true forever, because there is no peace in the Middle East when you have that are not just have the ability, but it is ingrained in everything that they are told from the very day that they are born. They are to destroy anything that is Western, which is Israel represents the West to them and those values.
The 2 big attacks on Israel, one was on Yom Kippur, and 10/7 actually was right next to Yom. It wasn't too far from Yom Kippur. So you begin to wonder what the mindset is if they feel there's the enemy, if there's a lull in the security at that time, where, the vigilance, because that's the second time surrounding the Day of Atonement, the holiest day of the year for the Jews.
It's not by coincidence. They actually attacked on Simchat Torah. So when the Torah is actually given to the Jewish people, that's the 3rd holiest day. And they know that, because they traditionally, historically, the Jewish people will always stay close to their faith, and they bank on that. It's beyond disgusting. It's like To explain it to someone that perhaps is an observing Catholic, it's like being attacked on Easter, on Christmas morning, but all the time, every single time, in the most disgusting, heinous way.
What's going on with Iran? Why Iran right now?
Iran has been a threat for many, many years, and they have been, enriching everything that they could in order to have nuclear weapons. But it was one of those things that they were doing it from two sides. At one point, they're quietly enriching. We, as the U.S., knew, but just decided to kind of ignore that, I guess. And in the meantime, because they weren't so aggressive about it, they were quiet. They have been financing all of these terrorist groups. Every single terrorist attack that has happened in Israel or outside of Israel has been financed by Iran. And so it got to the point where if you don't get to the head of the snake, it's just going to continue. Like the Houthis. Come on now. Where in the world would they have the ability, the weaponry, the financing to be able to do anything? And all of a sudden, nobody even knew who the heck they were before that, was outside that region. And so at this point, it was Iran had no other choice. And I'm not, I'm deferred to David on this as far as history of war. But at a certain point, they saw that Israel was just going to defeat every single one of these proxies. So Iran would only have the choice of dropping a nuclear bomb on them. And that's why we had to stop it. We being us collectively, which I consider us as supporters of Israel. For me, Israel is a proxy of the U.S.
I mean, who keeps Iran in line if they have the nuclear weapon? We know with North Korea, China seems to keep them in line to a certain extent, right? But who would keep Iran in? Or do they slip it to one of their proxies that, here, do what you want with this bomb or what have you? Mm-hmm. So it was a very, very dangerous situation, and action had to be taken, But this is where the question, I think, now is, where does this all lead to? Where are we going from here? The action's been taken. Now what happens?
The military intelligence here is really not discussed as much as it should. And the fact that the Mossad, the intelligence arm in Israel, has infiltrated Iran for years. At a certain point, there apparently is some sort of facility in Iran, or that was training the Iranian military on how to capture or deal with Mossad. It was run by Mossad. It's there is a joke about how, it's not, people don't wonder how it's possible that for 20 years you had these secret agents in Iran that were Israelis pretending to be Iranians with a family and everything for their entire lives. That was not what was surprising. It was that a Jew was able to keep a secret.
Sort of like the Latinos, we can't keep a secret.
Well, but I think that everybody's an expert right now, and they are completely overlooking and underestimating how this isn't for us to figure out. There are highly sophisticated, intelligent, brilliant people that know exactly what they're doing. They're not perfect. They may make some mistakes, but we're very lucky to have them in the U.S., and we're very lucky to have Israel as an ally, because you have those minds there as well. It's definitely like 007 times.
Well, I mean, if you go back to the 72 massacre in the Olympics, they took out everybody that was involved. But the highlight to me was Ehud Barak, who I love. Dressed and tough guy, not a great looking guy, dressed like a woman, and took out the final assassin in Lebanon. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. I think to speak about how they get things done is, you can have a million theories. You can have 99 theories. It's not going to be any of those. It's something we haven't thought of. And that's how you survive. First of all, when you're the size of New Jersey, right? And the other thing is when you're in the gym all the time, because people are attacking all the time. You have to train. You have to train because they're not talking, I mean, I'll give credit now where credit's due. The peace has held with Egypt after they signed the agreement with Sadat and Begin back signed it in March of 79. And that's good. With Jordan, that's good. But there's a lot of other people that want to just see the destruction of not only the state of Israel, of the Jews in general. And there's where it transfers over here too, because, America, there's a lot of Jews in America as well. they're targets for, in some shape or form, whether it's from here or whether it's right-wing extremism. Because remember, the guy that went into the synagogue in Pittsburgh in 2018 wasn't affiliated with Iran or anything. He's homegrown anti-Semite. And these are the things that happen, the hate crimes and a number of things.
So my question is, do we believe that Iran has been dealt a blow significant enough to stop their nuclear threat?
I believe so. And I'll tell you, I'm taking it from a different kind of perspective, not necessarily that we destroyed everything. I think that partially what we didn't talk about, and David did mention something that made me think of it, was the peace with Egypt, the peace with Jordan. What we're seeing in that part of the world, that peace is due to economics. They want to have nice things. They want their people to have nice things. And those people want to be able to travel. They want to have tourism. And the Iranian people, the Persian people as a whole, did not like or do not like living under that regime. So right now they have the opportunity to really decide where they're going to go from now. We've given them that, we've opened the window, and then they need to decide how they're going to manage it. Nobody wants to live, no sane person wants to live in a country that is going to get into a nuclear war with anyone.
I'm going to quantify this by saying the current regime in Iran, right?
Right.
Has been operating with proxies because they did not want to get engage in an all-out war, say with Israel or even the U.S. And here we are.
It's the time for the Iranian people, not the regime, to stand up and take over, as they should. And they will then decide what happens to those nuclear facilities. They are still standing there. They're just no longer a threat. Apparently most of these nuclear scientists have been eliminated, but these are highly intelligent people. It doesn't mean that they can raise new ones. This is just, what are they going to do now? Do they want to be part of that new wave of the Middle East? And it's been discussed. Could you imagine how incredible it could be to go and vacation in Iran, in Beirut, in all those places that many years ago were just fabulous and fantastic, that have become just scary. I think social media has helped those people, the ones that had access to it, understand how nice it could be. And when you compare what people in Gaza did versus what they could have done, the joke of, Trump was going to build a bunch of golf courses there, that's kind of funny, but it's not, because that's what they could have done. They could have had, amazing resorts. They're literally on the best, territory that you could possibly be on the Mediterranean. And so Iran has that ability right now. And the fact that we are so generous in the U.S., I'm certain that we would be very willing to help them build whatever it is they need to build, as long as it's not a threat to us.
Yesterday, I was reading that the Ayatollah Khomeini has issued fatwas towards leaders of countries who are blasting, if you will, Iran and their leadership, specifically their leadership. What does that represent to us here domestically?
You'd have to think, if they're attacking or doing this to leader A, country A, B, C, D, E, well, maybe it trickles down to the communities, the people there, the cafes somewhere, the synagogues somewhere, or the churches, And so looking back, coming full circle into this country, you have to elevate your situational awareness, I'm thinking. Not to get paranoid, not to ruin your way of life. But, the old adage, right, September 12th, when it came out by the ad guy, that see something, say something, hear something, just don't brush it off anymore. But, then you can take a step back and say, listen, firefighters went to work yesterday and they got a call to put out a blaze in Idaho, and they get ambushed, and we still don't know the reason or what's the reason. And so these things happen, or somebody goes into a school, not politically related per se, and takes out a bunch of kids. I mean, are we situationally aware for things like that as well? Because we should be.
From the law enforcement perspective, right? You ran a police department, you were executive officer in one of the largest agencies on the East Coast of the United States, city of Miami. think from that perspective, law enforcement readiness. And Mayor, from your side, how do you lead a city and thread the needle of supporting the local law enforcement and what they have to do to continue to ensure security and safety of your community?
I'm proud enough to say that in 2000, myself and a couple others, we taught the entire department weapons of mass destruction, then did the whole thing to the civilians. And really, it was almost clairvoyant of the chief at the time, not knowing what was coming 11 months, a year later with September 11th. The fact of the matter is, it has to be a constant training. It has to be a constant vigilance. Just things along those lines. Whatever worked a decade ago and you haven't seen since, doesn't mean it stopped working. They just haven't chose to take that route again. There may be some issues in security related things that won't happen again because we certainly beefed up everything, much like getting on a plane now. Everything got beefed up right afterwards to the 10th degree, after 9/11. But there's still other things that can happen. We still have shootings near the baggage carousel for a variety of reasons for people that checked in their luggage, whether it was terrorist related or not. There's a lot of things that go on. Nothing should be left off the table. And and you have to put the cops in that mindset, not to be paranoid, you protect and serve, but you have to be hyper vigilant.
Our police are very supported. In fact, I'm very conservative with our budget, except for the police. Whatever they want, whatever they think they need, I trust them 100%. And whenever there was a threat, you mentioned at the beginning, Robert, that there was a heightened threat last week. I think it was everyone went on overtime. But back to what David was saying, I never really even thought about it. The younger police officers, they weren't even alive September. And it goes back to, history does repeat itself. You have to understand history and what happened there. And do we wait for something horrible to happen here again for us to wake up? I think it's important that the training is supplemented on always by whomever can supplement it, not just from the city. We send our PD to Quantico for training, but certainly we could do more. You can always do more, right? It's never enough.
Without doubt. So before we go any farther, I'd like to ask you both, how do you think this current, most recent episode has impacted you personally?
Are you referring to the
most recent event between Israel and Iran?
How it's impacted me personally is, as I mentioned, I have family living in Israel. I have Iranian friends, very similar to the war with Ukraine and Russia. I think people underestimate or just don't understand what the connection between the Persian people and the Jewish people and the history that they have and how they feel like very much like cousins. But with that aside, I can say that I feel like finally, like there's actually a sense of relief, like enough already. We're going to finally get rid of that threat that's been there for so many years that has stopped that area from becoming what it should be. And really, it pisses me off. I want to be able to go to Israel. My daughter was supposed to go to Israel on a fellowship. All these kids were sent back, after the birthright. It angers me that sometimes people need something like that to wake them up, and we're not supportive enough of what's happening over there to really put an end to systematic hate and radicalization, the Islamism over there that is ultimately looking to destroy us, to destroy America. It's a wake-up call, I hope.
What bothers me most, we talked about the fatwas, right? And I remember when I first heard that word, it was when Salman Rushdie wrote the book and they took it out on him.
Mm-hmm.
It really aggravated me. He had an opinion, and it could cost him his life. Decades later, he almost did die. He was stabbed. He lost an eye. But I think, after a while, you sort of get pissed that, you have to walk on eggshells in this country. You can have difference of opinions and stuff. That's fine. But you have to concern yourself about where you're going to go or what you're going to do. You got to, and you should always be in that certain code that, you're not living a life in la la land, not knowing what's going on. Have a situational awareness. But the threats, I'm not big on the threats. I don't like the threats. And
I do want to bring up that war is regrettably horrible, but it's good for the economy. And this new renewed sense of patriotism in the US. I think with the July 4th coming up, you are going to see a lot more American flags, which is incredible. I think you are going to see more people, more young people joining the military. We are going to have to add to our military budget. But then I think that overall it gives people a sense of security. And when you're secure and you feel safe, you're more likely to go and buy things. You are less depressed. You are more likely to go to work. And so these are things that affect us very, very directly. And I think that we'll see the effects of this probably in the next 18 months.
When you say the economy, you're speaking about the overall national economy, right? Not the individual household.
Economy does, yes, national economy, but it affects people individually. So if I'm scared or I feel like my family is in danger, I am going to act very differently than when I feel proud of my country and I feel safe and I feel like I'm going to go out there and, really live my life and, be the best me I can be.
Consumer confidence.
Thank you. Very well.
No, I get it. That's going to be interesting to watch, right, and follow how perceptions shape the economy, certainly the confidence side. On that note, this has been another episode of Bets and Badges. You can find us on all major podcast platforms, that is Spotify, YouTube, Amazon, Apple, iHeart, and of course our Bets and Badges channel. All you have to do is search us at Bets and Badges and you'll find us. Mayor Svechin, thank you. Chief David Magnuson, always thank you.